And this is Jason Pitruzzello. Thank you. Sorry about that. I should have asked you about your last name. I apologize. So, Jason Pitruzzello, he's going to be actually talking about a phishing simulator for phishing attacks called Fishverse. God, say that 5 times
Yeah,
fast,
no kidding.
right?
You didn't have to practice this speech.
Oh my gosh. So Jason is a newcomer to cybersecurity, having recently completed his Security Plus certification. He's passionate about combating scams and enjoys gaming, including building recreations in virtual environments. Put your hands together for Jason.
Cybersecurity is one of the most oxymoronic fields of work available today. On one hand, it's an arms race between security professionals and threat actors who want to compromise their systems. On the other hand, it's an arms race between developers who want their software to be accessible and easy to use versus security professionals who want to bang their heads against the wall when they find yet another database vulnerable to SQL injection. But what makes hunting for vulnerabilities the cybersecurity version of the never-ending story / Groundhog Day fanfic is the fine line between incompetent development and malicious attacks. So it is with the Fishverse. The Fishverse advertises itself as a PvP work-to-earn phishing simulator created by MG Labs, where players can monetize their catches as NFTs. It says it is powered by AI, but AI here just means Pac-Man level of NPC interaction, not ChatGPT or a similar project. It also clearly advertises itself as a cryptocurrency project. The crypto angle is front and center. And until recently, the Fishverse was available on Steam for PC. This Steam integration was the start of my journey down the rabbit hole. Because, as most of you know, Steam refuses to publish games with crypto and NFT components. Merely looking at the game's Steam page felt like a terms of service violation. As I was first browsing it, I was waiting for Gabe Newell to send Agent Smith to nuke my Steam account from existence for merely opening Fishverse's page in the Steam client. And when that didn't happen, I felt that tingling sensation in the back of my head. You know the one. It's the sensation you get when you feel like you found a security issue that no one else knows about. I started scribbling notes and firing up my virtual machine, installing Steam on it, and preparing to explore what I figured had to be a piece of malware that escaped the great lidless and all-seeing eye of Valve. I confirmed for myself that the name of your avatar in the game is just your email address without the domain. And the leaderboards for PvP, same thing, email addresses without domains. The game also uses MetaMask integration, and on top of all that, this is a PvP game, so other players on the server can see your email address without the domain. You can be hypothetically griefed by someone who, if they have 2 brain cells to rub together, can stalk you online. Now, I'm not the smartest person in this room, but when I saw this, I said to myself, they are obviously trying to tie email addresses to MetaMask wallet data as part of a social engineering scheme that includes, but is not limited to, spear phishing. But I'm here to tell you that after having spent considerable time getting Fishverse to work in a virtual machine, making so many dummy MetaMask accounts that MetaMask servers are probably tired of seeing my VPN's connection, working through broken web pages only accessible via Wayback Machine, and at one point staring at my screen in a fugue state, wondering where in the hell my life had gone so horribly wrong, I've concluded that the Fishverse is not malware designed to harvest data for spear phishing attacks. I am not too proud to admit that I was wrong when I wrote the initial proposal for this presentation. Instead, I submit to you that Fishverse is the platonic ideal of poorly designed gaming software that has security vulnerabilities built right into it at a fundamental level. If any of you, and I'm talking to security professionals in this room right now, if any of you ever need to explain to your developers why integrating security into software development is important, you point them to Fishverse and say, look upon this gaming app, ye mighty, and despair. With this colossal of a screw-up, none of your customers would long remain. And I mean that quite literally, as I could never get matched up with other players for PvP due to no one playing it while it was still available on Steam. So let's talk about how Fishverse is not malicious and is instead a monument to bad security design. But before we get too far into it, I need to explain some of my methodology. Over this summer, I did some initial examinations of the game's features. I strictly ran the PC version, even though there are mobile versions out there. Anything I have to say about Fishverse only applies to either the Steam PC client or their proprietary PC launcher. That being said, as time passed and the game was patched, it actually became less playable and more broken. It is now currently delisted on Steam, so if you want to fire it up and see for yourself some of the things I'm talking about, you will find it extremely difficult because even if you manage to grab a copy of it, it doesn't work. I don't mean the servers are shut down, but that literally the game code refuses to accept mouse clicks on important UI elements, like login with email or select language. This means that the live demonstration of Fishverse's security flaws I had planned 2 months ago when writing the first version of the script will not be possible. The game's web pages are also currently down with whois verification still pending and expired security certificates. And while the game is tied to the FVS token, the token stopped trading in August, although CoinGecko reports it traded $249 in the last 24 hours when I was writing this part of my script last week. How it stopped trading, but also has $249 in trades is a mystery for the ages, and I don't know if this reflects worse on CoinGecko or the FVS token, to be honest. It does mean that Fishverse can be considered a dead project, and it means that since I didn't get a lot of recorded footage in my first playthroughs in the summer, I will have some footage from YouTuber John, alongside some Wayback Machine snapshots to bolster my presentation. I will be clearly labeling any footage so that there is no confusion as to ownership. And I've also redacted a bunch of data, player data on the leaderboards, which makes the leaderboards look stupid, but like I don't want to be promulgating the security flaws of this. Any player data you see was used in a testing environment by me or someone else, not actual players playing the game. Let's start with why I initially thought that Fishverse was malicious software. It generated a number of red flags when I first heard about it. These red flags included listing the game on a platform that specifically excludes this kind of software, integration with crypto wallets while being promoted on a non-crypto platform, plain text exposure of email address information, a white paper that says security is a top priority and that nobody can see your PII despite plain text exposure of email information, and their policies regarding the distribution and burning of tokens. The listing on Steam was particularly vexing to me because it seemed really bizarre. The game was available on Steam for 8 months before being delisted. My suspicious mind immediately thought about what kinds of loopholes they were exploiting in Steam's terms of service. Or was it the other way around, and the devs were lying about the NFTs and crypto when in fact there were none in the game, thus ensuring Fishverse complied with Steam's rules? While this may seem a tad conspiratorial, I have seen games on Steam advertise that they are crypto-based, but it later turns out there is no actual blockchain integration of any kind. I also did some really basic OSINT on the management of MG Labs, which I'm not going to show you for privacy reasons, including their CEO, Rokas Inakis. He lists himself as self-employed with no trace of Fishverse I can find on his LinkedIn profile. The other senior management also do not list Fishverse on their current LinkedIn profiles, but if you dig far enough back, you will find some evidence that Fishverse was front and center on their LinkedIn profiles earlier this year alongside another project, MetaShooter. MetaShooter was another play-to-earn game built on the blockchain that was meant to be a hunting simulator. There is scant information about MetaShooter available, although it is listed on Steam as a free-to-play game that is looking for playtesters. But MetaShooter has also been scrubbed from their LinkedIn profiles, so I suspect it's probably a dead project as well. They all do seem to be real people, but I am not literate in Lithuanian, so I'm not personally up to the task of understanding everything in their profiles. So let's start our exploration of red flags with Steam itself. Steam clearly states that applications built on blockchain technology or that allow the issuance or exchange of crypto or NFTs are prohibited. There isn't a lot of wiggle room here at first glance, and if Fishverse had been pulled within a month of being listed, I'd have just assumed Valve just took longer to figure out that Fishverse was breaking the rules. But the game was only delisted in August, and I suspect that the delisting has nothing to do with crypto. Having played Fishverse, and I'm using the term played here in a really loose sense, just to, you'll see why in a second. But having played Fishverse and having looked at its MetaMask integration, I think that the developers are, in fact, following the letter of the law. The Steam version of the game doesn't require MetaMask integration. You could, hypothetically, play Fishverse on Steam without ever seeing or using cryptos or NFTs. But if you wanted to actually get your Fish NFTs or compete in PvP, you must download and use the off-Steam client, which required MetaMask integration. Thus, Fishverse technically followed the rules as written, even if it wasn't following the rules as intended. We see this in some other crypto games on Steam, including Phantom Galaxies. The Steam version doesn't integrate with the blockchain, so it doesn't violate the rules. Of course, games like Phantom Galaxies are also available on Epic Games. And if you don't know, Epic Games is completely okay with blockchain integration. So not only is it available on Epic Games, but a game like Phantom Galaxies, it actually, works. And so the Steam player counts are really small, and the Steam version of the game is basically a free demo for the Epic Games version or the mobile client. This is Game Sales 201. If your game doesn't fully comply with rules for the most popular game distribution platform, nothing stops you from having a version of the game that does comply with those rules listed on the platform. Then you just nudge players off the platform and ensnare them into your ecosystem later. For those paying attention in the audience, you've probably already figured out that even if Fishverse had been successful, the Steam client would always be a secondary consideration if it was ever updated at all. The Steam storefront in this case is just a free demo of the mobile Epic Games version. Yeah, that's a little suspicious. But what was even more suspicious is that they actively promoted crypto in their publicity, both on and off Steam. To be clear, I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong or suspicious about promoting crypto projects. Rather, their promotion of crypto on a platform that does not allow any blockchain functionality is what made the game suspicious. Their social media accounts specifically mentioned the FVS token, and their white paper mentions play to earn right on the first page. Whenever a message, or in this case an advertisement, comes from an unexpected source, such as a platform that does not support the supposed functions of your software, even the most basically trained security-minded person should immediately find it suspicious. And since the game's crypto functions are off-platform and require users to use another client, Fishverse completes some of the first steps of a social engineering attack. The unexpected communication with a request to move further communication to a less secure or poorly understood venue. Put another way, Steam customers see what is a seemingly legitimate product on their favorite platform, but when they try to play it, the game encourages them to move to a less secure platform that they should not trust. This is analogous to a situation where I sent you an email from a seemingly legitimate source at your workplace that asked you to reply to my home email address, totally not a social engineering attack, at IGotYouSucker.com. When I know that Steam does not allow crypto games on their platform, the entire project is suspicious. Then we have the plain text exposure of email information. This was the most egregious part of the game that made me think it was malicious. Now, you should know that Fishverse advertised itself as having PvP. If you're thinking this PvP would involve using fishing rods from Skyrim in an epic duel to the death, I'm here to disappoint you and the spiffing Brit. It's just fishing, sorry. The PvP in question is literally you just go out with other players and have a fishing tournament. In PvP, and indeed in any fishing mode, your avatar has a name. The name is just your email address without the domain. And this name, see how it's spun too? This, the name is just your email address without the domain. And this name is visible to other players, both in a PvP match and on the leaderboards. This is completely unacceptable in terms of basic cybersecurity. Note that as far as I could tell, there was no way to change your avatar's name. So it's not like the email is just a default or something like that. Fishverse is effectively a free database for spear phishing attacks to any threat actor who can bother to add domains to these avatar names. I'm sure there's even 100 JavaScripts that'll do it for you. But it gets even worse than that if the blockchain integration in the game had actually worked. Because you can see who is online and playing in a PvP match with you. And because the fish you catch are supposed to be NFTs, someone with the proper expertise could tie certain crypto wallets to email addresses by looking at when specific types of fish were minted and correlate that to when you saw someone catch the fish in game. Notice that I said if the blockchain integration actually worked. We'll be talking more about that later as well. The larger point, though, is that the game seemed designed specifically to enable spear phishing attacks against players looking for NFTs and crypto from the ground up. And I want to further emphasize that this wasn't a closed beta version of the game or a leaked alpha. Before it was delisted, this was available to anyone on Steam for free who wanted to play it. On top of this terrible design, Fishverse's white paper emphasizes security. This is not a surprise. I can't think of a crypto project, even the outright scams and rug pulls, that do not talk about security. But just like some crypto projects can be seen for the rug pulls or Ponzi schemes they are from the beginning, so it was with Fishverse. The white paper specifically mentions PII. This gives it the veneer of having a security mindset. But if you talk about securing PII in the white paper, and your software architecture literally makes email addresses visible in the way I have described, then I think everyone here should be suspicious of both your expertise and your motives. But this issue in the white paper goes beyond a simple failure to adhere to security standards. It was a red flag to me as malicious because the white paper seemed to be boilerplate in its character. Everyone in this room knows that exposing email addresses in the fashion I've described is a problem. Surely the developers themselves would know it. Yet they talk about security and PII in their white paper. Their white paper almost reads like it's just a template they put together because you just have to have a white paper for a crypto project. That's how you make it look legitimate. But they didn't actually compose or read the contents of their own white paper. And this suspicious white paper led me to the final red flag, the company's discussion of burning tokens. Now, in some projects, burning tokens is critical to how the project works. But if we look at the white paper again, the conditions under which tokens are burned seem a bit odd. Players must take certain actions with their fish in order to keep their NFT and not have it burned at regular intervals. These actions include posting their NFT and equipment assets to the marketplace, or they will be melted down into token and burned. These are their words, not mine. I don't know if this means the NFTs that are not posted are turned into FVS currency via some mechanism, and that is what they mean by burning, or if they mean they are outright burning the tokens at a null address, or if they mean they are turning them into something else and redistributing them into the ecosystem, or some combination of those things. The language here is so poorly written that it calls to mind the squid coin scam, where marbles, a secondary token, were required to sell the primary token, squid coin. I bring this up because some players may come to the game with the erroneous assumption that any NFTs they acquire are truly owned by them and not subject to a centralized actor deciding the fate of their tokens and coins. This is another situation where, despite the veneer of legitimacy, the game does not live up to its implied standards. You might think you have true ownership of your digital fish, but if no one reads the fine print, you are in for a rude awakening when your fish just suddenly disappear with all of their hypothetical value when the tokens are deliberately burned at a null address. The players wouldn't even be able to complain because the company has made it clear it has the power to do this in certain situations. And I keep emphasizing the null address here because I'm only even assuming that's how they would burn the assets. I could say I'm burning tokens, but the smart contracts involved are actually sending the assets to a wallet or wallets controlled by the devs. It's like the phishing simulator version of those old airdrop NFT hacks where anyone who claims the airdropped NFT ends up executing a smart contract that drains their wallet. You'd be able to pick up that the devs had scammed you by examining the blockchain, but there's nothing you could do about it. The potential for scamming players, even without violating their own stated aims and goals, is rather high. This should be a pretty solid overview of why I thought this was a malicious piece of software. So I did what any self-respecting tester would do and set up 4 dummy MetaMask accounts under the same SRP, 4 dummy Gmail accounts, promptly lost the keys and passphrase to the dummy SRP and made a new one with new accounts, set up a virtual machine to run Steam, set up another virtual machine to run the standalone PC client, made sure my VPN was in place, and I tried to play Fishverse. What you're seeing now is a recording of my initial gameplay experience in Fishverse. You see the mouse? This isn't just me moving it around. It's me trying to click UI elements. They don't work. And I don't just mean that you can't access help or accessibility options. You'll have noticed that once I get to the login screen, I can't even quit out of the game. And while this footage doesn't show it, there were some times when I couldn't log into the game either due to UI elements not registering clicks correctly. Now, you're probably thinking the 2 thoughts that I had. First, wow, this sucks. But second, is this some kind of deliberately bugged UI meant to snare players into letting the game run in the background while they do other stuff and the game's client gets up to mischief? As far as I can tell, no. Some UI elements have inconsistent functionality. Help menus just never worked, but the login and quit functions would sometimes work and sometimes not work. And both the Steam and standalone clients suffered from these issues. This is why, to give another silly example, Lockbit sure as hell has a functional UI, both for victims and its partners and affiliates. I mean, just look at that sleek and efficient UI. I wish the UI in the software my students use to turn in their work was that good. By the way, I wonder how much the UI developers for Lockbit got paid. Any ransomware experts in the audience know the answer to that question? I'd love to hear about it during questions and answers at the end. But when I started poking around with Wireshark and looking at my accounts and the MetaMask integration, it became all too clear to me that Fishverse was incompetently designed and executed at a fundamental level. My second clue that the game was incompetent and not malicious was the MetaMask integration. Now, I need to preface this by saying that at no time could you find Fishverse and MetaMask's listing of games via hyperplay. But that by itself means very little. MetaMask's SDK is right there for anyone to use and add to their app. MetaMask even advertises their integration into Unity. And Fishverse is a bunch of Unity assets put together. But here's the problem. First, the Steam version did technically have MetaMask integration, but that integration consisted of, you guessed it, a non-working UI element. You could not even input passwords or account information. The player would click on the MetaMask UI element and nothing would happen. The off-Steam PC client worked differently. The UI would let you technically enter MetaMask information, but I noticed 2 things that made me shake my head in frustration. First of all, despite the game's implied integration with blockchain, at no time was I sending or receiving packets from Fishverse servers unless I had specifically connected to a PvP match. In fact, network activity was unchanged from before launching the game to after I launched it unless I had engaged in the PvP element. Therefore, the game isn't even online unless you are playing PvP. I double-checked this by outright killing my network connection on the desktop I used for the test, as in I just turned the card off in hardware settings, and Fishverse didn't seem to notice or care in single player. Second, you can type whatever you wanted from MetaMask credentials, including my new favorite MetaMask account, totally underscore not underscore a underscore fake underscore MetaMask underscore wallet, with the password Vincent Adult Man. While this does not guarantee that the developers aren't harvesting credentials via just logging what you type in the UI for later use, it does raise some questions as to why they would bother to harvest credentials if there is literally no connection to their servers outside of PvP. They should be keylogging the data immediately, not having the game pretend to be online, and just letting credentials sit there in the UI. But what's even more interesting is that I attempted to play PvP while monitoring my MetaMask accounts and the dummy email accounts I was using for this test. This may seem weird, but I need to explain PvP and Fishverse a bit. There are no bots in PvP, so normally you need to either be matched against other players via the game's matchmaking, or you match yourself with friends. And the game is not supposed to let you play PvP without another human present. This is part of their whole competing for NFTs thing. But I was able to get into PvP matches by myself through the Manfred level hack of just clicking OK to start a PvP match even when I wasn't supposed to be able to do so. Seriously, I pulled up some of Manfred's tips for duping and interfering with packet data to try my hand at testing the security of PvP, and it was completely unnecessary. I was really sad about it too, because I thought that with the poor design, I'd pull off some fancy tricks. It was not to be. Once I got into PvP by myself, I was able to do some phishing. Wireshark was showing some packet data going to and from what I presumed were their servers, but I noticed that not only did there seem to be no interaction with my wallet, even using dummy credentials to non-existent accounts had no actual impact on gameplay. There were no warnings saying that I couldn't get NFTs or fish. As far as I could tell, even in PvP, you weren't getting any NFTs and nothing was happening on any blockchain. It is possible that the game defaulted back to single player, but given the other flaws we've seen in design, I'd question whether the game itself even knows whether it is in single player or multiplayer mode. The closest equivalent I could think of is if you started Star Trek Online through Steam, logged into the client with the credentials you made up on the spot, started playing, only to realize after a few minutes that there are no other players, nothing is posted on the exchange for players to buy and sell from each other, and your ISP has a massive service outage in your area that you didn't notice. Yet the game goes on and keeps encouraging you to buy dilithium from other players and join a fleet so you can do stuff as a team. But what was the most interesting part of this was what I saw after partaking in some Fishverse PvP all by myself. And what did I see? Nothing. What I mean by that is there's nothing to see either in my dummy email accounts or the MetaMask accounts tied to the same SRP. No tokens, no currency, or anything like that ever appeared in any of my accounts. And to be clear, that was when I tried using legitimate credentials, not like made-up credentials. I was waiting for NFTs with maliciously coded smart contracts to show up in my accounts, and even more telling was that there were no junk or spam emails with scams in them, malicious links, or malware attached to them. Aside from the verify your account emails for each account, the inbox and spam folders were clean as a whistle. I was fully expecting all kinds of nasty stuff to be piling up within minutes or hours of playing Fishverse. It never happened. This surprised me to no end, because I would have expected my data to be sold by the Fishverse team for a small sum. Not necessarily to even threat actors, but just to advertisers. Since that never happened, either the Fishverse developers are playing 5D chess and waiting to use my dummy accounts in some kind of Russian bot scheme to influence the war in Ukraine, which would be hilarious because the developers are Lithuanian, or they aren't threat actors at all and they just have really bad security for their software. Okay, so if they aren't threat actors, then we need to ask ourselves where Fishverse fails in terms of software development. The security for their game fails miserably due to the following reasons. First, they have plain text email data visible to all players in a PvP setting that would allow for a spear phishing attack. Second, the plain text email data is visible to everyone via looking at the leaderboards. This is an additional security problem because not only do threat actors now have targets for spear phishing attacks, but the high-scoring players on the leaderboard would be the whales worth working over with those attacks. I mean, why target someone with no NFTs when you know these folks have earned all kinds of stuff? That is, assuming the FPS token and associated NFTs had actually had any value. Third, the game has buggy UI elements. These buggy UI elements can cause the game to continue running indefinitely, even when the player wants to quit, in addition to numerous other problems that, ironically, could simulate an actual attack against the player's system, even if it's just broken software. Fourth, the game has MetaMask integration, but the other security vulnerabilities mean that persistent threat actors could find clever ways to tie email addresses they see in-game to account activity on the blockchain and tie PII to accounts and wallets. Fifth, the game does not sanitize inputs when dealing with MetaMask integration. I was able to access online PvP with fake MetaMask credentials that didn't even have the correct number of alphanumeric characters. This means threat actors could access PvP without even using dummy accounts. But more chilling is that if they aren't sanitizing these inputs, what other mischief could an attacker get up to? I didn't find any unsanitized input problems with my cursory examination in July. For example, I couldn't crash the game by flooding input boxes with garbage, and I couldn't force the game to display weird things by submitting malicious JavaScript code into the UI. But I certainly wasn't able to try everything, as the game was more broken when I did a more thorough test in August. By August, Fishverse was no longer accepting certain kinds of input at all. And sixth, the game claims to follow decentralized finance ideas in its white paper, but in execution, they seem to use their token in the same way AAA video games use in-game currency. This means players may think they are getting an immutable token based on their game experience that they can own and sell, but the reality is that those tokens can be burned, taken, or manipulated at any time by the developers. I find the issues with unsanitized inputs to be, and plain text email addresses to be a problem that goes beyond bugs in the code. Bugs are unintentional problems in software. In many cases, they're even what I sometimes like to call counter-intentional. You want the software to do X, but it does Y. But the unsanitized inputs and plain text emails in Fishverse instead seem to be closer to another, more famous situation where the developers literally have no idea that there is a problem with how the game is set up. Just to compare Fishverse to something a bit more famous, let's talk about the login procedures for Dreamworld, an MMO. For those who don't know, Dreamworld is a game that advertised itself on Kickstarter as the last game you will ever play. It met its Kickstarter goals and had investment from Y Combinator. There was some YouTube drama involved with the game a few years ago, but what's relevant for us today is the alpha release in May of 2021. Upon initial release, the login procedures consisted of no login credentials. Instead, the login was your IP address. That's it, just your IP address. Not an IP address as part of multi-factor authentication, it's just that. But to the credit of those developers, they changed it super quickly to something, way worse. They changed the login to be your MAC address. Wait, did I just say MAC address? But if you thought that was bad, that's not the worst part. Half of your MAC address was visible both in-game chat and above your avatar's head in a multiple user environment. I wish I had the slide of me just banging my head against something, because it's just insane that anyone would do that. That wasn't a bug, though. That wasn't an unintentional problem in coding. It's not like the MAC address leaked through something. It was intentional to the game's design. It was built in at a fundamental level because the developers didn't know it was a bad idea. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it's the same basic design philosophy as Fishverse. There is no consideration that anything should be pseudonymous. It is this kind of problem that highlights the lack of security mindset in the developers of both Dreamworld and Fishverse. Thus, Fishverse isn't intentionally trying to hurt its players in any way, but it is an unsecure pile of badly written code, and the unsecure elements are baked in at a fundamental level of design. This isn't just another oops, our database is vulnerable to SQL injection kind of thing. The game would need to be fixed at its core in order to be somewhat secure. I'm glad Fishverse isn't available on Steam anymore, as I wouldn't want Steam users to have any information compromised. But I will say this. I never thought I'd have a chance to look at a video game that I can point to and say, this right here is why someone came up with the term DevSecOps. Remember, folks, don't let your devs forget everything they learned in cybersecurity kindergarten, even if they think they have the coding expertise to create the next World of Warcraft. And we'll go ahead and open it up for questions and answers.
If you have a question, raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone to you, and you can ask your question via the mic.
Yes.
Hang on one second.
Stephen. This isn't about compliance, is it? 'Cause
No, it's a really trivial question. How'd you find this thing in the first place? How did it grab your interest?
I I went down a rabbit hole about 8 months ago looking at crypto games and NFT-based games and seeing if there was, if they were good legitimate projects. And one of the content creators I followed did a video on this. He did a 15-minute segment on it. And I literally thought he was bullshitting me. Because I was like, no, come on. No, you just made that up, right? And then I grabbed it. That was back when it was still available on Steam. I grabbed it and I was like, oh, wait, no, that is what's happening. And it was even worse than what he put into his video. But there's a lot of bad stuff out there if you go digging for it. Yeah, just bad.
Since you were looking into NFT type of games, I'm sure you've stumbled upon the banana clicker game as well?
Yes. Yes, banana clicker, which we will not be discussing today. I can't believe that has been as successful as it was. Just, you know what? I'm not going to even put that on the screen. You guys, if you want to go look at the banana clicker game, just go look at it on your own and understand that things are different and weird in some communities.
Is that like Cookie Clicker, but with NFT?
Kind of, yes. It's that kind of a thing, yeah. Cookie Clicker, but with crypto and NFTs and a whole bunch of others. And integration into Steam Marketplace, which is a whole other cesspool of stuff you do not want to get involved with. I made $3 selling stuff on Steam Marketplace the other day, but that was like 10 years of like stuff that is just sitting in my Steam inventory. All right. Going once? Okay, so you got another one.
So I've known Jason for a long time, and before about a year ago, I knew him primarily as an English professor. So can you, yeah, exactly, the leather patches on the elbow. Can you give us a quick précis about how you, or why you pivoted into this field?
Well, I'd have to preface this by saying that in my teaching of composition to students, that's entry-level English writing courses, I always emphasize the importance of analyzing the effectiveness of communication. But that also veers into understanding how communication is used to defraud and scam people. And until somebody made me aware of it, I did not understand how much of the cybersecurity field was tied to social engineering attacks on people rather than software. And when I figured that out, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, if you're teaching people to critically think about communication, that's like half the steps you need to right there to secure that part of your perimeter. Because let's face it, like, you can spend an hour scanning ports, or you can just call someone up with a fake voice and try and get their credentials, which will get you into the system faster. And so when I spent about a couple months working on my Security Plus certification, and I was like, oh, okay, this could work. This could work as something I want to be involved in. And I realized that I'm not the best at coding. I'll just be like, that's something I have to work a lot harder at to compare to most people probably in this room. But like critical thinking skills that I do in English class, like that's a part of a security mindset right there. It really is. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Thank you.
Anything? Oh,
Nope.
Yes.
There you go.
Hi. So I have two questions. One, I didn't catch it. What content, originally you said you caught on to this via a content creator. What content creator was that?
John, Jauwn.
Okay. And then the follow-up, you said you kind of went down a rabbit hole for these NFT crypto games. Mm-hmm. And I've been cursed, like, I'm a gamer, I like to play games. I like, and this idea of NFT and crypto games have been on the outskirts of the games I like to play. And a lot of them are garbage. Most of them are garbage. Have you found any redeeming quality at all from any of these games?
This is recorded, isn't it? All right. I'm going to say no, but I need to preface the no with something then, which is, in my brain, I can see good legitimate use cases for blockchain integration with video games. But in my brain, I also see that Ubisoft and EA and companies like that have no reason to do that, because if you have legitimate decentralized finance in your NFTs and crypto, then the people who make the game don't control that premium currency, so why in the hell would they want that? So that, like, on the one hand, there's that competing design philosophy right there out of the gate. And the other thing is, and I don't want to, this is going to make it sound like I'm making fun of MG Labs developers, but the crypto space, there's a lot of legitimate uses in the crypto space, but it tends to attract a lot of folks who want to get rich quick, which means that there are already people who have the dream of, I'm going to be a game developer. I'm going to be working at the next Blizzard. I'm going to be the rock star on stage announcing Diablo Immortal, even though it was booed off the stage. You combine that with crypto as a way to get rich quick, then you start getting ridiculously short development times and shovelware out the door. And I have access to Unity. I can do a Unity asset flip in 30 working days, and I'm just going to staple a blockchain onto the bottom of that. That's not good game design. That's not like a technical limitation you can overcome. That's not a, oh, you just need to be a better programmer or a better scripter. That's literally at the fundamental level of what am I making? It doesn't work. So no, I haven't seen anything good. If you've seen anything good, please point me in that direction. But I'm not one of the skeptics who thinks it's automatically all bad, because there could be good use cases. It's going to come, but to be clear, it's going to come from the indie space with people who are actually really serious about having good games, not from the big corporate space, because there's no financial incentive for the big guys to do it.